Welcome, anyone just now attending. This is the St. Louis Advanced Angular Lunch. This is historically has been an in-person event hosted at Oasis Digital, which has been a great fun way to do it. And now, I guess for the unknown amount of future, we are doing it as an online event. For this month, we don't have a speaker. Instead, we have a panel. There's a number of us who were at the online version of ng-conf. We were going to do an ng-conf panel, so I guess this is an online ng-conf online panel to kind of talk about our experiences there. And then after that, we'll just kind of do some just general Angular related chatter. So I don't know, I can moderate if something needs moderated, but it probably doesn't. Why don't we just sort of go in order, give our general impressions, and then we'll kind of go in the order of the conference and give specific impressions about things that happened in the conference. Paul, you want to go first?
Sure. So overall, general impression, I mean, as you might expect, when you're switching from kind of an in-person to an online, there's all kinds of pros and cons, and that definitely showed through here. I really appreciated the idea that, you know, hey, I'm responsible for kicking off a new thing right now at work, and I was able to kind of halfway pay attention to the conference throughout the entire 3 days while also getting some stuff done because it was just right there on the other monitor. So I really appreciated that part of the format. But at the same time, as you might expect, you know, the hallway track was non-existent. And so like all of just the personal connections that, you know, we've been building over the years of attending ng-conf, you know, are going to have to wait at least another year to keep furthering the ng-conf brand of that anyway. So in terms of, like, you know, the talks themselves, I mean, it was ng-conf quality talks. So it was, you know, great as always in general. So I'll save more specifics for another round.
Yeah, it just occurred to me, we didn't talk about the basic specs for people here who were not at it. So it was still 3 days, and it went from, what was it, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Mountain Time each day. So in terms of sort of total footprint on your schedule as an attendee, it was, you know, far less hours of events of things going on. What don't we normally go from about 8:30 in the morning till late evening at the in-person conference?
Depends
so it's
on the day.
maybe half of the total number of hours of doing activities at the conference online versus what would happen in person. Okay, then to kind of follow along with a couple of Paul's things, yeah, I really like the quality of the talks. Yeah, and we'll wait till everybody did their little intro before we talk about specific talks. But I thought it was definitely kind of full quality content. I didn't feel let down by the quality of the content. I really missed the hallway track also. Just kind of making contact with people in the Angular community we've gotten to know over years. I'm hoping that if more conferences have to happen online in the future, that we'll see some kind of technology developed and deployed to try to recapture a little bit of that hallway track in an online event. I also found that many people were pretty well prepared for their AV setup, but that's in my don't like column also. I was also really surprised to find that some folks, even folks who are like reasonably high profile people working at big companies who really should be well equipped for AV, like couldn't get their audio to work very well. And we will avoid naming the names of any, but if you go back, when the recordings are released, if you'll notice there's a wide variation. So that was a little bit disappointing, but given the, you know, intense time pressure, I'm not really even complaining about that. So that's my overall impression. Somebody else?
I'll go. So I have a cat in front of me who is trying to get on the camera. There we go. I also attended the 3 days of the main conference, but like Paul, I had other meetings going on, so I wasn't able to watch everything live, but I did catch up and watched at least some of all of the actual presentations afterwards. The way that it was structured is that Frosty and Joe and a couple other people were working in some office somewhere in Utah. And so they were kind of emceeing, and they were pretending that there was a stage, and they'd say, all right, now I'm going to bring up the stage Shy. And then they would share from Shy's feed or Dan's or whoever. So they would have several of these talks with Frosty doing banter in between them. And then after a group of these talks, they would have a panel. I didn't really watch the panels. In addition, they had a full slate of workshops. So Chris and I attended the NX workshop on Monday, and then Chris and I also assisted on the NG Girls workshop on Tuesday. So had more involvement on that side too. The NG Girls virtual did not work particularly well, in my opinion. They had as many mentors as students, and it just there wasn't enough help. Having a 1-to-1 ratio of student to teacher is really putting just too much on the student of the teacher, just watching them like, do you have a question now? Do you have a question now? In terms of the talks themselves, varying quality. Some were very good. Some were like amazing and really adapted to the format well. I was disappointed that several of the talks seemed to be pre-recorded and didn't really need to be, that I could tell. And with that, especially some of those talks were ones I watched later. Like when you were watching them live, there was a chat feature. And so you could get a little bit of a feeling of a hallway track because you could see people chatting through, and sometimes it was just too fast going through. But at least there was some sense of community. If you watch it after the fact, that chat wasn't there. And so I was essentially watching, but for the pre-recorded talks, it was I could have been watching just a YouTube talk that had been uploaded at some point. And so there was really nothing conference-like about watching that video, especially when I didn't have the chat. So there were a couple of them that were really good and took advantage of it. But some of them were just, why didn't you just do it live? And it felt kind of weird. And in terms of overall impressions, the main topics that I noted were Ivy is out, yay, let's start using it. And everyone is doing NX now. So if you, just like Narwhal had a few talks of their own, but NX came up in a lot of other talks, and a lot of other talks just assumed that Narwhal's NX is the way that you are writing your programs these days. I'll let someone else speak now.
So Chris was there for part of it at least.
Yeah, I have to admit, I was sort of half paying attention as well because I was working on client work. But like a lot of it was kind of hard to pay attention to the chat and the videos because the chat would have nothing to do with the videos some of the time, and it was basically the NX folks teaching everybody about NX in the chat. And the chat was kind of cool though, except for that there's all these people sitting at home, obviously really bored and just typing things in just to be heard in the world. It's just like, typing in random things that are not useful to anyone, so if it had been like, the chat was going by so fast, it was hard to like really capture the meaningful stuff in between people just typing pizza and other random things like every single day. So the noise was a little annoying, but but all in all, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed listening to Frosty tell jokes in the middle. And the only, disappointing parts were when the video would glitch and then you couldn't get it back. So like Deborah Carada's video, I have a note to go back and watch it later because I gave up because the first part glitched so much you couldn't really continue watching it, so I just tuned that out. But overall I enjoyed watching it. Yeah, of the parts that I saw, I didn't really, there's nothing that stands out to me as being particularly new or exciting. Kind of a lot of going over what does Angular 9 do for you and what does an X do for you. There's a lot in there about the Jamstack, which I did not understand before the conference, and I guess I understand now, more or less. So I guess that's the one thing I was learning was what the heck is that about. So they kind of packed that in at the end of the third day there. That's all I got.
So Chris brought up the actually, are there any others of us in our delegation that were there who are here?
I was there.
Yeah, okay. Well, you were not part of our delegation, but Kevin, let's hear your impressions.
I was
You
confused
are
whenever
hereby promoted to give
you,
impressions.
you said, I didn't quite hear what you said. You said everyone who went to ng-conf turn your camera on. I'm like, okay,
That's
but I
fine. You're
didn't.
legit. What's your
Okay.
impressions?
I think that organizers did a great job switching to an online format. Um, Even though they caught a lot of crap from attendees being rude about technical glitch on, like, the entire internet's having problems right now because everyone's using it more. So that didn't bother me so much because it's not anyone's fault that the video would glitch and whatever, and stuff happened. There were some really good talks. There was also some really, like, why was that talk selected? I'm not going to say which ones I thought that about, but um, I was a little salty. I submitted a couple talks, and then there was one, like, just like what I submitted picked, and I'm like, I wanted that, whatever. What's what I was going to say? Oh yeah, so Jamstack was a big thing that was talked about a lot, and they also talked about server rendering and whatever, but none of the official talks actually really explained the difference. That was all in the chat, and that's, like, one of my favorite parts of the conference is, like, being able to answer people's questions in the chat, because I interacted in the chat quite a bit. But none of the official talks, like, I wish there was a talk about, like, this is server rendering, this is Jamstack, and this is why you would do one or the other. They kind of presented both, but never really answered. Everyone was asking why one or the other, and I think I answered it a little bit in a couple of the questions for people, but no one actually addressed that, and that was disappointing because I think that's something that people aren't making a connection about. All in all, I think it went really great. But I think there was a bit of holes in the different technologies they were offering, but not really explaining one or the why you would use one or the other. So I think it confused people sometimes too.
So I've been grabbing topics, and I want to kind of cycle back through people's impressions kind of briefly on a bunch of these things. So Chris talked about the side chat quite a bit. So did Kevin. So my impression of the chat was both that negative of, wow, it was surprisingly noisy, but I also thought it was actually kind of great to have a non-rude way to, like, add useful information live in real time. Like, sometimes people ask questions and I would, like, try to, like, bang out a half sentence answer to a question and try to help somebody out, which you certainly couldn't do, like, during a real personal talk. So I feel like there's some challenge, but some real opportunity in a real-time chat channel. What are other people's thoughts on that?
I think some people went into it with a strategy, some of the companies, and that we are going to be very focused on the chat, and really, and some companies I think did a good job at advertising themselves and promoting themselves in that, which was interesting. One of the funny things with the chat, though, is at one point one of the speakers wanted to know how much lag there was in the chat, so he asked everyone who was watching to type the word pizza. And so when 1,900 people typed the word pizza at the same time, we found out that the chat system could actually take down the server, and it just broke everything for several minutes. So that was amusing.
Yeah, but then people kept typing pizza for the entire next 2 days. That's the part I'm talking about, like just people being annoying. It's like, all right, we get it. It was funny, like, once 2 days ago. Stop it.
I would have liked if there was somebody moderating the chat, and if people were going to be just useless in the chat, they would get squelched for 3 hours or something. But I don't even know if the platform had that capability. By the way, somebody is typing chat into the thing here. David, you are welcome to turn your camera on and give us your feedback from having been there. But other people's thought on chat.
Yeah, I think the pizza thing was really annoying. I got the vibe that people were trying to break it again after the first time it happened, and it was annoying. But people are gonna be silly, so.
There was some about the chat in general. I felt it actually made a lot of the speakers a lot more accessible to the general public than a normal conference. I think that I was seeing the speakers interact throughout all 3 days with people in chat in a way that I know a lot of folks wouldn't necessarily be comfortable going up and approaching people in person like that. But through the chat channel, it just kind of feels a little bit more anonymous, a little bit easier to approach. And everyone was able to benefit from all of the interactions with the speakers. So like each one-on-one conversation was able to be witnessed by all. And so like it wasn't siloing all the goodness into individual conversations. So I liked that aspect of it. On the flip side, the selfish part of me says that I felt the need to forego the interactions I normally would have had with the speakers because it felt more important to just let them have the conversations they were having. Whereas in person, again, I would have found an appropriate time to go up and have conversations with the speakers that I wasn't able to have because of the volume on chat.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. With the speakers interacting in the chat, like there were several of them that after the talk they got on the chat, and then also with the pre-recorded talks, like I understand what Lance was saying about it felt like why is this even here if it's not a live talk? But in several of those live talks, the speaker was in the chat while their talk was being streamed, answering questions in real time, and that was I thought was really cool.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I think that without chat, it would not have felt like a conference at all to me, because chat was the only way that there was actually interaction with people. So even though it had flaws and it crashed the system at one point, it was the closest thing that we could have to the hallway track and the Gibson Girl Lounge and all of that. And it definitely doesn't replace the real thing, but it did allow community, a sense of community that just would not have been there if it was only the videos with some banter in between them.
And David here, who I don't know if I recognize him from any of our in-person events or not, but he is not from our delegation. But what were your thoughts on the chat?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been there in person, but it's been a while. I live out in Colorado now, actually.
Oh, that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, welcome back. Welcome back to St. Louis virtually.
Yeah, thanks. It's good to join you guys again. Yeah, I mean, I agree with everybody. I think there were some really kind of cool things that the chat provided, like just a lot of that real-time interaction. And like, I think Paul was talking about how like, it was sort of like everybody's private conversations that they would have had with the speaker, but everybody can see what's being discussed. And I'm sure it wasn't as in depth or, like personalized to the individual interaction that would have happened. But that was really interesting for me. This is actually my first year attending. And so I've never been to the actual in-person conference. And so it's kind of interesting seeing it through this lens. And there was also a lot of noise in the chat as well, and so that you kind of had to like take that with the benefit of getting that real-time community feedback. I thought the questions portion was kind of cool too. So you could actually like separate out your questions that you were hoping would get answered, and people could upvote them and things like that.
Yeah, that was pretty cool how they were kind of moderating and making sure that a bunch of different questions, that everybody got some questions and so on.
Yeah.
Okay, well, looking through the other topics that have gone by, this topic has not gone by, but I'm going to throw it out anyway. Aaron or Frosty did his usual thing at the beginning where he like reminded people of the code of conduct. And it occurred to me that like a pretty significant difference on an online conference with just a chat channel is there's just a lot less opportunity for anybody to conduct themselves well or poorly. And like really the only negative conduct I saw is like the thing that Chris pointed out of people just kind of playing with the chat tool by typing irrelevant things and having lots of junk going by. And it kind of makes me think maybe the code of conduct on an online thing could be like much shorter and mostly about not typing stupid things in chat. But just a lot of the kind of misbehavior that you could maybe have to kind of police at an in-person conference, like there's just nobody there. So I don't know. And anybody have any thoughts on codes of conduct and in-person online events rather?
Yeah, so similar to the whole, like the chat, once again, the chat being like the key feature, I was kind of surprised because conversations that again would have normally been in private, where saying something that was a little insensitive or inappropriate in a private conversation is much more likely to have been let go. Like you were seeing people continue to have those conversations in public, but they had the entire public eye kind of laser in and hold people accountable as a collective. And so even when there were things that started to step out of line, the chat system itself and the social system that it created kind of brought that into alignment and self-corrected. It was kind of interesting to see.
I wonder if the chat enforced that people's real name and identity is visible with their message history, if it might further increase that kind of social policing where people would not feel free to misbehave if they know, oh, this community is going to know it's me misbehaving. More thoughts on?
You're saying if
conduct?
somebody, Penguin 12 might feel more confident saying things than...
Exactly. Any other thoughts on code of conduct?
I didn't see anybody being inappropriate in the chat. The only thing that was annoying was with the quizzes and apparently people taking them more than once. I don't know if that's per se a code of conduct violation, but it was not okay. That an online platform will give people the ability to do. But all in all, it wasn't really that big of a deal. So I don't know.
Yeah. Back to the code of conduct, one of the aspects of the code of conduct is basically don't use it as a dating scene. And I think a single public chat thread kind of eliminates that. Like, even if I had wanted to hit on someone, I'm not going to do it there. So I think that just the nature of it excludes some of the types. You could still have had people saying rude things or insulting things or politics and religion and stuff like that, and I didn't see any of it. But like someone could have just started insulting politicians or whatever. That could still happen, but like there's no way that I was going to try to talk someone into going back to my hotel room there, because it wouldn't even work, even if in the best case. So it just kind of resolved
Clearly,
that
he
on its
thought
own.
this through.
So we know
Yeah.
what Lance was trying to figure out how to do, though.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, I mean, part of the code of conduct is something along the lines of, don't try, this is not a dating scene, and it kind of took care of itself.
Any more code of conducts? Because I've got another really good topic, but I want to get any more code of conduct comments first. Okay, so I was waiting for someone to mention the existence of a hotel. And so, like, a thing I've been kind of weighing is how much better or worse was this than like kind of a real conference? And if I think about it, like, I think they charged $249 to attend the online conference. And, when we have delegations go to a kind of a physical conference, between costs, hotels, which are huge money, and flights, it's probably at least a couple $1,000s a person, maybe $3,000 if it's in a high cost city total. So my thoughts are like, what do people think about the relative value of how much they got for $249 for an online conference versus how many, potentially 10 times as much for an in-person conference? Thoughts on this?
I think Narwhal made bank on this conference.
You're just talking about how the fact that people kept saying, hey, NX is great. That's just because NX is great. I mean,
but my point is that like the payout, like, depends upon, what you do again with this chat scene in terms of, does your company have a way of, actually engaging in conversation with the folks that are there to create and foster and build relationships that will, be beneficial to a company. So unless your value gain is actually the information that you're taking away from the talks themselves, like, you've got to pretty much be gaming that chat system to have any
you're talking
value
about
add.
Value to a sponsor, right?
Well, any organization that's sending someone there, like, they're doing that as an investment.
Yeah.
Regardless of whether or not they're a sponsor. And the investments come in two forms, either the knowledge gain or the relationship business network growing.
Right.
And
okay, so like
that was gone.
it's like because I have another question about sponsors. So splitting out sponsors, you're just saying just like literally, Joe Blow attendee, if they attend a physical conference, they have this opportunity to create relationships. They might get job offers. They might, who knows all kinds of great things that might come from it. And with only that one little chat channel, you don't get that. And so the question is, does that match like it is only so let's say it's a $250 versus $2,500, right? So like maybe it's true that like the actual content was worth 250. The content in the chat channel was worth 250, but the content, the chat channel, and having the relationships with all the people is like that's the other 90% of the money. Maybe that's the other 90% of the value, right?
Well, it's like you said, whenever we show up there, like our activities go on for 12 plus hours every day when we're there in person.
Yeah.
I think the answer to your question can vary depending upon who's going. I could imagine a first-time brand new to the Angular scene developer who just wants to get the content got just as much for the $249 as they would have for 10 times as much. Someone who knows most of the content is there but is going to the conference to either sell something or to network or to see friends because they've been in the community for a long time, it's definitely cheaper, but you're not getting the same things out of it. So it really varies depending upon who the attendee is, I think.
Yeah, so for people who were just going to walk in, watch, and then walk out and go sit by themselves, that person is unambiguously much better off at the online event. A person who was only going to go interact with people, I mean, this basically, it's not an event because there's just the one little chat channel.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that's interesting is that the videos, apparently, they haven't announced it, but I've heard this by asking ng-conf. The videos are supposed to be released at some point, and they will be freely available to everyone. I don't know if that's going to happen or when, but if that happens, then essentially all of the benefit of the conference, except for the chat itself, will be freely available without paying even the $249. And so, like, it does kind of bring a question of what is the value proposition of a conference overall. If $500 to go to this some other conference, how much of that $500 is because of the networking? How much of it is because of the content? And we have a different example here with ng-conf this year compared to other years because almost everything except for the chat itself will be freely available afterwards. You just have to wait.
Yeah, it is kind of disappointing that the chat is gone because you can't go back and see that. There was a lot of good answers in the chat. But yeah, like they said they're gonna release all the videos, so I'm kind of excited about that because I was the only one from my team there, and there was some good talks. And I'm like, that's something that's hard to explain. It's like the TypeScript type ones. I've shown for the Frozen talk was really good, and the fact that I can get that video later and show that to my team is really exciting to me. But like as far as like in person versus the online conference, like I was planning on like going to Utah and or going to the conference and not really going to most of the talks because they have the expert room. That's something we lost too, of the experts room where it's basically like panels all day on Wednesday. Didn't get to do that, and that was disappointing. But
Chris, I don't think you answered this one yet. What do you think about the relative value of a online with some chat versus showing up?
Well, I was just really disappointed because Lance and I had plans to go eat steak, but
True.
I mean, we've had some enjoyable meetings and meals when a bunch of us have gone together. It's true.
Yeah, it's definitely more fun to go there in person. I mean, as far as the actual content and everything, it's pretty much the same. Lance mentioned the workshops. I mean, I think the NX workshop, is probably about the same as it would have been. The NG girls thing, I think didn't probably work that well, like Lance said, because you know, I feel like when you're teaching, I mean, we teach online classes, but I still feel like it's better when you're actually there, especially if somebody totally new. So I feel like we would have had more interaction if we'd actually been there in person, than these like little Slack channels. Yeah. But I pretty much agree with what Lance said. You know, it kind of depends on how much you'd be going and talking to other people. So.
Well, I may grab the next little topic then. So this is one that Paul brought up. I write down ideas when I hear them go by so we can cycle back and see what everybody thinks about them. Sponsors, interacting with sponsors, value of being a sponsor. I can talk about this a little bit because we were supposed to be a sponsor. I guess we are a sponsor of ng-conf 2020, which has now been relocated to 2021. And we were also promoted to be a sponsor of the 2020 online version. But I would say as a sponsor, I mean, it's great to get a shout out, but there's, you know, at least a much less obvious value of not, you know, being able to be there and like interact with people who see you and they see your stuff and they want to come talk with you about your offerings. So in the most simple case, at least with the way this online event was done, with, you know, very little interaction except just a side chat, there was relatively little value to being a sponsor. But what do other people think about interacting with sponsors, being there as a sponsor? Paul, I know you had thoughts.
I mean, in terms of interacting with sponsors, I couldn't. Had I not actually like been a part of this community for so long, I couldn't have even told you who the sponsors list was. I don't know. Like they were scrolling by, but it was so easy to completely tune that out and ignore it and there was no other way in which they really conveyed that. So I was able to completely tune it out, and unintentionally even. Like normally, like there's like physical pieces of things that you get handed in your bag, and you get that repeat exposure every time you're in the hall. You see the big banners, you see the targeted advertisement, you see exactly what the sponsors want you to see. That was just completely absent here. And again, it all goes back to that chat where you had Narwhal, who, like granted, they have a great product that drives conversation, but otherwise you're just kind of like on your own to find a way to say something useful in chat that could draw attention to your particular brand. And that was pretty much it from my perspective.
Lance, I'm pretty sure I've seen you walk up to other sponsors at conferences we've been at together and strike up some really good conversations. What are your thoughts on sponsor interaction? Maybe even like how could it be good in an online event, even if it wasn't really possible with the platform we were on for this one?
Yeah, I mean, theoretically, you could have a technology solution where there could be a sponsor side channel. So, you know, if you want to click on it, you could click on a button and then go talk to UI Bakery or whoever the company was, or someone from Oasis Digital. But yeah, it's without the swag, without the booths, there's just not that much. You know, it's as Paul said, or maybe it was Kyle, you know, the logos would flash during the talks, but I wasn't looking at that part of the screen. And Frosty would do a plug for each of the sponsors during the banter period, but I didn't pay much attention during that time. So yeah, there's not a whole lot that I know of that you could do for sponsors right now.
I think it would have been a little.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, like Lance said, it was just Frosty getting up there and kind of half-heartedly saying something about a sponsor. You know, and I don't know if people would have paid attention or not, but you know, if they had actually had the sponsors live stream some, you know, because don't they do that at the real thing? Like the sponsor gets up on stage for like 5 minutes or something.
If you've paid enough money, not every sponsor.
Yeah, but something like that where you actually like cut to a video feed of, you know, somebody giving a little spiel or something to actually watch and try to make it informative, you know.
I would say though, while that's great, I'm impressed with what they were able to pull together in a month, and maybe
Oh,
they could
yeah.
have gotten to that level
Yeah.
if they'd had 2 months to plan instead of 1 month. And so there is some level that I'm sure their wish list and their want to have or wish they could have done list is a lot longer than we even can think about.
Okay, any more sponsor thoughts? Okay, well, I've got 2 more topics, and then we'll open it up to just random Angular conversation. Okay, so the penultimate topic was something that I really enjoyed, and I've actually been enjoying a little bit just when I randomly get dropped into a lot more online meetings than I used to in this current era. Is it's pretty cool to like see people kind of like in their own space doing their thing. It's just like it's like more, a little more connecting to the person to see them like in their space doing their thing versus on a stage somewhere. And I don't know if anybody else got a little bit of a positive vibe from that. I did. Anybody else get any positive or negative thoughts from that?
The one thing that comes to mind for me is one of the pre-recorded talks that David East did on Firebase, and he took advantage of that situation by putting in little jokes that when he was transitioning from one part of his talk to another, he had a little skit where one of his kids would come bother him and stuff like that. So it wasn't really, I mean, the room that he was doing it in was not that interesting, but you got to see his kids and he got to make these jokes. And so I know more about him as a person than I would have otherwise. For the other people, it wasn't that big of a deal for me to see the room that Eric Simons happened to be sitting in or anything like that. But that's just me.
Other thoughts on seeing people in their space instead of on a stage? Okay, so the final thing that I have anyway is first, I was so impressed that they were able to make it as good as it was on like last minute severe pressure of all kind. Like Aaron and the other organizers, I thought, given the circumstance, it was really amazing. And I'm curious if everybody else had the same impression or different. But the actual discussion topic is, what if we're still stuck in this world where we're doing online things? What are some ideas of like how online things, like what could be better? What could make a future ng-conf or even a future Angular lunch a little more like the physical one? Like just kind of wide open. And so that's my last topic that I had on my list here. And then once we talk about that, any random Angular chat for as long as anybody wants to hang out. So thoughts?
Yeah, I got one. Like, do some hardware checks on the folks involved. Like meet well in advance. Find out if they've got the hardware. Like even as like a speaker gift, give them some hardware to use. Like send them a really nice Bluetooth headset that is going to have great quality of audio for the event, and like just make sure that part is nailed up. Like that is the ability to effectively share some AV across the wire is like the only thing keeping all of this together. Let's make sure that works well for everyone.
One small diversion on that, Paul. I had to borrow my webcam from my office setup to lend to my son to participate in online school, because let's say you knew what hardware you wanted and you really wanted to buy it 2 weeks ago online. Almost every part you could ask for to be in an online meeting from home was sold out, at least on Amazon and Best Buy and the others I checked. But yeah, that is a really, really great point. But go ahead, more thoughts.
Yeah. I don't know. I know that the world of conferences is changing. I keep an eye on the Angular conferences that are coming, Angular and JavaScript and related conferences. And every conference before June that I pay attention to has either been canceled or postponed or moved to virtual. This is at least temporarily a new normal. ng-conf might be the first big conference that has tried this. I mean, maybe not. There's huge other worlds. There's conferences out there, but yeah, this is going to be a normal thing. Some people are not going to want to go to conferences even after things have been declared safe, because some people won't find it safe, even if the powers that be say it is. So we're going to be all figuring it out, whatever it is.
Chris, Kevin, ideas on how an online conference or even an online user group meeting could be capture a little more of the magic of in person?
I don't know. I would be interested to see how like it. I remember in one of the emails it said that would be a dual screen experience, and from what I could tell, it wasn't. So I was kind of like curious, like, what is this? It's gonna be a dual screen experience. How's that gonna work? So I don't know. I feel like that could have been. I feel like the chat could have been something you could break out to another screen and have. Or I don't know. I don't know exactly how that was gonna work. That's why I was kind of excited about it. I feel like there could be a way to do a multi-track event online too, like to reproduce, like you can go to these talks, or you could go to the experts room, or you could go to um, the other things that they have on Wednesday at the actual conference. There could have been like a hallway track where people would go in, like just jump in this Zoom call that's just attendees that want to talk to each other. I don't know. There's various different things you could do. Like instead of having just that one chat stream, that is just the only one that is, so you get the jokes and the questions, the legitimate questions and legitimate answers all mixed together. There could have maybe been like more of like a, it was brought up in the Slack channel, or it was brought up in the chat that maybe there should have been an ng-conf Slack with like, so we could have like channels of like, here's random and here's like question and answer, and maybe channels for different topics. That could have been neat, to kind of split that up. I think there's lots of stuff you could do if we're hopefully not stuck doing stuff purely online forever. But
Yeah, I
but
could
yeah,
easily see there being a Google spreadsheet, right? That has here's the calendar of events, and like right there in the cell, there's a link to join that particular room's Zoom meeting. You know, like support video inside rooms. Like that's the closest that everyone has figured out how to get community right now is through video. So at the very least, like have opportunities to turn a camera on and see other people.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think Kevin's thing about like the expert room, it seems like without a whole lot of technology invention, just with more lead time, right? Instead of this immense pressure last minute, I think a conference could totally have some scheduled times where you click here to cut, and it's queues you up, whatever, to be in the expert room for whatever side topic. Yeah, I love that idea. Chris, I haven't heard anything from you on this one.
Sorry.
Well, I agree with what Kevin said, just the idea of having like dedicated rooms or the ability to direct message and things like that. So it's basically like Slack is what I was thinking too. That's what the NG Girls Conference, they had a Zoom meeting for the main portion, but then they like broke people into groups and had dedicated Slack channels just for specific like pairings of mentors and mentees and stuff. And that part, I thought that was a good idea. That part of it actually worked pretty well. That's all I got.
I think they were working on planning some of this stuff though, because based on the emails, like I remember one of the emails said there's gonna be like events where there's only a limited number of people in the events and stuff. Like it sounded like they were planning on doing like certain rooms or certain tracks where it was like a real physical room. There's only 20 people can get in, because like we kind of lost that because everyone was in the same space, so to speak, at the same time. But I don't think they actually finished planning all of that out because it didn't actually happen that way. But it could, and then you could simulate like it is. It's like a physical room. You have to get there, and if there's no seats available, well, then you got to wait till the next one for some of these talks that need like the smaller audience and stuff. I don't know.
Well, it seems like we went through, everybody's had their say on all of our kind of items here. So I guess we'll consider us victorious on having done a panel, and I guess we mostly have a remaining 10 minutes, although I think we're allowed to go over for our lunch. So any random conversation of any kind is welcome. So, well, I guess anything vaguely Angular related. And I know Lance has something he wants to point out here. So
Yeah. So there are two talks in particular that I think I'm going to go back to later to watch. And interestingly, for an Angular conference, neither of them is specifically about Angular. They're about TypeScript and RxJS, which actually I think goes to a bigger thing that we've noticed about Angular, is that even when Angular dies someday, because it will, it's possible that the legacy of Angular will be that it brought TypeScript and RxJS to the fore. But anyway, I'm probably going to go back and rewatch the talk by Ben Lesh on what's coming up in RxJS 7. And I'm going to rewatch the talk by Craig Spence on using a frozen fan fiction as a way to explain some of the interesting typing things that you can do with TypeScript. Both of them are, Ben's was much more of a straightforward, slide after slide talk. Craig's was, as I said, fan fiction that included a song at the end. I mean, it really, really captured the medium well, and it had really good content explaining how to do things in typing that I just had never seen before. So yeah, and I recommend those two. And as I said, it's kind of interesting that my two top talks from an Angular conference aren't about Angular.
Yeah, that TypeScript talk by Craig Spence was probably my favorite one. It was absolutely fantastic and nothing to do with Angular per se. It was everyone should go and find that one when it's posted and watch it. It is fantastic. It was called Into the Unknown if you want to write it down.
I'm blanking on the name. What was the name of the 11-year-old?
Aaron Ma.
Aaron Ma.
Aaron Ma.
Yeah,
I take that back. His might have been my favorite.
but also not about Angular.
It doesn't matter what it was about.
Yeah.
It was quite interesting.
You should definitely check out Aaron Ma's career as an 11-year-old before he burns out.
I went and I looked at his website and his GitHub and I'm like, he's 11. I was, what the?
The crazy thing is, I first saw him a year ago when he was 10 at the Google Cloud onboard thing. He was part of their presentation then, so he's already been around for a while.
Yeah, when he came on, I was like, oh no, not another talk by a kid just because it's a cute kid. Like, please, not another one of those talks. And then he actually went over most of the participants' heads and being able to describe the technical backing behind AI and ML platforms.
Way over my head. I'm gonna have to watch it at half speed because the kid talks so fast.
Yeah, that was amazing.
Any other recommended talks from anyone?
Well, I have a random Angular topic. I'm just so happy that Ivy is finally here. It is just so great that it's not the big thing we're all waiting for anymore. The future has finally arrived. So happy to see that happen.
And some of the talks about the internal APIs of Ivy, the render component function and stuff that might become public later, was really exciting. And I can't wait till they can clear up the blocking issues for having local component metadata so you can actually start getting rid of ng modules. I updated a statesales.net to it, and our bundles are so much smaller. It's fantastic.
Does anyone remember who the author of the form, nested form group talk was?
Is that the Wadellas?
Yeah, Jen Wadellas.
Yes, it was.
The control container and I.
Is the
Yes, that
session
was another good
list
one.
not on the website anymore?
Yeah, it is.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I loved her Animal Crossing theme. That was really cute.
Yeah, that was another one that adapted well to the online format. Like her talk, hers. There was a couple that had really, really good slides, like the Frozen, the Animal Crossing themed one, or the forms. Yeah.
Any other conference or Angular related comments?